I'm joined today by Michael Wright, who's a Bristol-based film and commercials director. Welcome.
Hello.
So you're very much a friend of Happy Hours, and you and I have worked together over the past 10 years on lots of projects. Thanks for joining me. So we're recording this podcast from Happy Hours studio here in the heart of Bristol. And the Happy Hour team are really proud that we live and work in the southwest area. And I just wondered, what do you enjoy about being in the Bristol area and the southwest? Why do you live and work here?
I guess partly the answer to that is kind of historical, is that I've lived here since the mid-'80s when I first started in the industry, and I moved here. It was the first break I had in the industry. It happened to be in Bristol. And I kind of stayed here for a lot of reasons, but I think what it gives you obviously a lot of the work I do is in London or in other parts of the world. I've been lucky enough that I've traveled a lot as part of my work, but it gives you that kind of slightly different perspective on everything, and you're not kind of completely stuck in a kind of environment that's just London or anywhere else. It's got a sort of life of its own, and I guess there's enough that's appealing about it. I don't sound like I'm talking it up now, but it's enough appealing about it that it's kept me here. It's just kind of been convenient.
Do you think that there's just a better work-life balance of being in Bristol, because and there's a really good creative vibe here as well, isn't there?
Yes, I think so. I think there's a very certainly in terms of work, there's a very can-do attitude in terms of the crews and the production people in Bristol. Certainly the last feature film I did, which we did in Bristol, it would be so hard to do that in another place, not just because it's not familiar to me, but simply being able to do things in a slightly different way to actually get the thing on the screen is something you can do in Bristol. That's not to say it's all kind of, a little bit kind of, kind of cobbled together or anything like that. It's just a different way of thinking that things are much more possible in terms of what you can do either in studios or location or just get things built or whatever.
So why do you think Bristol is a creative hub? I mean, you mentioned like historically, I know we've got some of the kind of major players here, the BBC and Aardman. Why do you think it's so creative still?
Yeah, I mean, I don't exactly know the reason why Aardman originally ended up here, but I sort of think probably back when I first started working in the industry in Bristol in the 80s, there was the BBC was much more, the productions were happening much more in the BBC, within the confines of the BBC, with BBC crews, and that gave people a lot of kind of, it was almost like a sort of mini studio, back then. I don't want to get kind of, misty-eyed about it, but it was a strange sort of place in many ways, in the sense that, people would have the time to develop shows, most notably, obviously, natural history stuff, and, that whole kind of idea that you would tell these stories with animals, but using different camera techniques and different things that weren't normal live action filmmaking, I think was a sort of kind of little foundation that Aardman was able to build on, because when they started doing animation stuff and needing, special cameras or special equipment, there were these kind of interesting, kind of boffiny type people and people who were willing to make films in a different way because they'd worked on natural history and worked on, they'd kind of drilled holes in trees and kind of shoved a camera in there so they could film some badgers in there or something. It was a different way of making films, and I think that was a good kind of foundation for the animation industry when it started up in Bristol.
So tell me a little bit about your career background. I mean, you don't have to go all the way back, but I'm just interested in kind of how did you get your foot in the door in the whole creative world?
Okay, the short version is, I mentioned Aardman already. I did a strange, I actually did a fine art course and did what was called kind of sculpture and filmmaking. So there's a bit of everything. well, there's a bit of sculpture and there's a bit of filmmaking, to be honest. And I wanted to get into the industry. I wanted to be a filmmaker, but it sounds desperately easy then when you talk to students now about the things they face trying to get into the modern industry, and it sounds rather twee that you could go around knocking on doors and handing people CVs and just arrive at the right time and you would get work. But it was still kind of hard to make that break into it and make some kind of a paid career out of it. I'd done a couple of little things that were broadly connected with the industry. Like there used to be a thing called cable TV, and I designed some sets for a cable TV show, and that was going on, but it wasn't anything kind of interesting that you could start to build a real career on. Then this thing came up. Aardman were looking for animators, really, but they agreed to see me, and I kind of came up for an interview when they were still 4 people in a room and a camera, basically. They said, well, it's very interesting what you're doing, but, we're looking for an animator. So, thanks, bye-bye. And you kind of think, oh, okay, well, that's that then. But they did actually, this is how long ago it is. They sent me a letter or a telegram. I can't remember which. I mean, it was really kind of, it sounds Victorian, which it virtually was. They got in touch with me by some archaic method and said, hey, we've got this, we need this set built for a commercial we're doing. And they just started to do commercials, which was obviously a big, shifting gear from what they'd done previously, just doing, short animations for the BBC or Channel 4 or whatever. And I just kind of hit it at the right time because after I'd done that, I got work on, there used to be a show called Robin of Sherwood that was happening in Bristol, and that was an HTV show, and I got work building props for that, and that was going on. So going back to that time, I'm not saying the Bristol filmmaking scene is not vibrant now, but it certainly was a very particular time then when, all this stuff was happening. I mean, it kind of really was sort of like you turn a corner and, they're doing Robin Sherwood there, and then, you got the road and we were doing something like Sledgehammer or Creature Comforts or whatever. So looking back, it seems like a sort of golden age, because when you're there, it doesn't seem like a golden age. It's just like Tuesday and it's raining. But yeah, so that's that was the way. And then kind of what, once you're in, you're kind of underway. And but all the time, so I was working in the art department, building stuff or designing stuff. But obviously my goal was always to get to direct stuff. So by the 90s, I had my own production company making animated commercials, and gradually over the years, I kind of gradually introduced more live action stuff to it, and then ended up doing purely live action stuff. What I would say is having the basis of, working in animation is a fantastic start for a director, because you learn to kind of time everything, and you learn to storyboard very, you don't have to storyboard endlessly, but it makes you plan the work you're doing, and that's a really good kind of basis.
It teaches you the craft,
particularly if you're doing commercials, because, so often we're trying to say something in 60 seconds or 30 seconds or 10 seconds. And actually the discipline that animation gives you in terms of storytelling is really useful to flip that into live action work.
So what does an art director do in the world of TV commercials specifically, live action TV commercials?
Well,
what would they do?
I guess, the term could, art director's someone at the agency is an art director. You'll have an art director and a copywriter team working, that's the creative team that's working on the ad at the advertising agency. But in terms of an art director, who you might call also a set designer to avoid confusion. So on a TV commercial, a set designer will either convert the location that's been chosen to shoot the ad in, or if we're shooting in a studio, then the set designer or art director would actually build whatever was necessary. Now, that might be as simple as, if there's a plain backing, they have to choose a color and maybe get the props that go with the person who's in front of the backing. or if you're trying to represent something that exists in reality, then you have to kind of create, whatever it is, a living room or a shop or whatever, and build it. And certainly for commercials, sometimes the needs are so specific that we might end up building really what you might think was quite mundane or everyday stuff in a studio, simply because it makes more economic sense to do it that way. Filming on locations, it gives you a certain degree of naturalism, but naturalism is not always what you're looking for in a TV commercial.
So what do you enjoy most about it, about the art directing? We'll move on to directing in a minute, but what do you enjoy about is it the creative side of it? Is it?
I don't see it as a separate thing, because it's almost like it's all part of the process of telling the story. And if you want to call that directing, then yeah, that's part of it, yes. But the whole, getting the colours of the costume that work, and doing the casting and the actors that are going to work for the role, that are going to tell the story, and the choosing how the lighting's going to look, and that lighting's going to be part of the storytelling, and the props and the set, and they're all just another part of the storytelling, as is the music and the how you decide to grade it, and how you decide to mix the sound to hear whatever you hear. It's all you're working to that roadmap, which is the story, isn't just the script, because the script evolves into something bigger that becomes the film that is the story. But all these ingredients all serve that purpose, and certainly art department's one of those things that's serving that purpose.
So you primarily work as a director in film and TV commercials now. What's the difference? What are the similarities between directing a film and directing a TV commercial?
Okay, big difference. On a commercial, it's my job to make the film for the client so that they can sell their product. It's not my film. You have to kind of, care for it and nurture it and love it as if it is your film. But at the end of the day, it's not your film. Your job is it's like being a chef in a kitchen. If the customers come in and they want steak, then you make a steak. And if they come in and they want a chicken salad, then you make a chicken salad. Or if they want tofu, you make tofu. Other meals are available. And then if they go, I changed my mind, I don't want a steak, you kind of make what they want. Your job is to use your skills to serve what they need. So that's your job as a director on a TV commercial. And it's best really to put ideas about what you want for this would be a great shot for my reel, or this would be, maybe I'll win an award if this ad's no. Your job is to make the ad for the client. And if you don't like that idea, do something else. Because there's no other purpose. They can't direct the ad. They need you to direct the ad. It's as simple as that. With a film, particularly if it's a personal film, you don't have that. You haven't got the thing where you're doing it for someone else. You're doing, yes, in a way you've got some idea that you're doing it for an audience, but you have to kind of follow your desire to make the film that you want to make. Obviously, when you make a TV commercial, you're kind of looking at a monitor, and there might be 8, 10, 12, 15 other people looking at that monitor and scrutinizing what you're doing and what's happening in terms of where you put the camera or whatever, or what's in the shot or whatever. So you're used to kind of working with someone looking over your shoulder. I don't mean that in a sort of ominous way or anything. It's just that's the nature thing, is you're doing something for them. And I'm sure if, a plumber's mending your washing machine, you might want to stand over them and check that they're, doing it properly. That's fine. And of course, if the ad's not quite what you thought it was going to be, that's kind of, you did everything you could to make it as good as it could be. The point is, if you're making your own film, if you're making a short film or a feature film, and you're trying to tell a story that you care about, there's no one else to answer for. Nobody's kind of, breathing down your neck. You might have a first AD or a producer going, we've got to hurry up now or whatever, or we can't afford to do another angle on this or whatever.
But there's more freedom.
But there's more freedom. But with that comes the responsibility that really it's all up to you to get it right. So the dynamic shifts, really.
Just focusing a bit on TV commercials at the moment, what do you think makes a good TV commercial?
I think there's two arguments there. There's an aesthetic argument, and you might go, well, that's lovely to, I mean, I don't drive. So if I could look at a car commercial and go, oh, that's amazing, but I'm not going to go out and buy a car. It's wasted on me, really, all the wonderful aesthetics. If a piece of advertising, whatever it is, whether it's content or a full-on TV ad, if it can make you think about a product in a different way, and that's the start of a journey towards purchasing. If it can change your take on that product. And obviously, in some ways, it's always easier to say to people, look, here's a new thing. This is new. And you go, okay, I'm interested, it's new. And then you can decide whether you want to interact with that or not. If it's already an existing product, if you've already got whatever, life insurance, and it's a life insurance ad or something like that, then it's really got to make you think about that other product in some significant way to you.
So how do you tell a story in 30 seconds? Because, say the average TV commercial is 30 seconds, or some are longer. And how are you able to tell a story in 30 seconds?
Story is an element that exists in TV commercials to a greater or lesser degree. Some commercials will have a narrative story, and you're essentially trying to compress as much as you can into that thing. And we've all shot lovely opening shots to commercials that maybe 3 or 4 seconds long, then it get cut down to a second or whatever. It is like you're so pressed for time in terms of what you can physically do. What my approach now is to try and shoot not every possible way of telling that story. That's wrong, but shoot every possible thing we might need, because there may be different choices in the edit that need to be made, and different, sure, we have a storyboard, and it's great to have a storyboard, but I feel happier walking away from a TV commercial if I've shot more than the storyboard. Not because I want a gold star from the producer, but because it just gives you that backup if we all know what we're doing. We're all professionals, but the fact is you film such a thing that you can put it all together and you go, it's not quite, we just need, and I'm always trying to plan for that extra thing that you might need, which is always very difficult because, of course, we got 10 shots to do today, and each shot, because it's all, certainly for a TV commercial, everything's very carefully manicured and curated. So each shot takes a long time to do, usually, to get it right. And it has to fit the timings. But generally, I'm always trying to get a bit of extra stuff to get us out of, if we want to shorten that line, can we cut to something else? But it's not always possible to plan for all eventualities.
What commercial work are you most proud of? Is there any kind of campaigns you've worked on in the past, or is there a particular piece of work that stands out that you're really, really proud of?
It's a really difficult one because actually I sometimes like a piece of work that is maybe not as aesthetically pleasing, but you can, sometimes the viewer shouldn't care whether that was a 20 grand budget or a £200,000 budget. But sometimes you think, oh, that was really pretty good considering the resources we had. So I tend to be more attached to or sympathetic to some ads I might have done that really don't look like anything. But you kind of go, well, we shot that like 4 hours and it was raining and it doesn't look like it's raining. And, so-and-so was a nightmare and there was that dog barking and somebody wouldn't turn off the radio and all these other factors that interrupt filmmaking very easily. That part of, I always think given enough time and resources, there's nothing special about directing. Anybody could direct a feature film or whatever. It's not special. Yeah, I do. Because if you had plenty of money and plenty of time, I'm sure you could get there. But the point is, the job is doing it in the time. Back to the chef in the restaurant. the chef's job is to prepare that food in the time he has, or she has. It's not, you're doing the job in certain circumstances, and that's the skill of it, really. So my job is to direct stuff, even if it's raining and it's meant to look sunny, and we've just lost an hour because the lighting truck got lost, or this happened, or, someone forgot to bring the tripod, or whatever. Not that ever happens, obviously. But all those factors that can throw a spanner in the works, you have to work when the spanners are in the works as well. That's the job. The job isn't sitting in a chair waiting for someone to bring you a cappuccino. No. And if you think that's the job, then just forget it. Do something else, because it's not that. It's like dealing with all the things that may go wrong or could go wrong, or making, to be positive, taking advantage of the things that go right sometimes.
So you've had some really good success with your latest feature that you've made. Tell me a bit more about it, and tell me what you enjoyed about it, and what are the challenges also involved in making your own feature film.
Okay, so The Undertaker was a film script I wrote a couple of years ago, and was an attempt to write something that I thought I could get made with the resources that I thought I could kind of round up. So it was a very practical process. I'd written this other script, which was a vastly different type of film, and there was one character in it who was kind of this Undertaker character. And he was a sort of, not a lesser character, but he was one of many other characters in the film. And I got sort of interested in him. I got interested in that character of the Undertaker, and I was very interested in. There's a scene in the Clint Eastwood movie. I think it's A Few Dollars More, where he's going off to shoot the bad guys, and he's walking up the street, and he goes past the guy who's making the coffins.
Yeah.
And he says, "Get 3 coffins ready." And he goes up and he shoots the bad guys, and he comes back and he says, "Make that 4." And it's a kind of humorous scene within that sort of drama. And I was kind of interested in that character who makes the coffins. I thought, well, that's an interesting character, the person who profits from the deaths of other people but doesn't actually do the killing. And where does he sit morally? And that's what the film's really about, is kind of, where do you sit on, if you're in that situation? Where do you, he's got this, the character has this very clear moral choice, and he chooses the wrong turning, really, morally. People do that. So kind of what happens then? How does that, he tries to kind of convince himself that he's not doing anything wrong, which I think we all do quite a lot, whether it's like, smaller misdemeanors than, burying people in graveyards. So it kind of examines those issues, and kind of when he comes to the realization that he's done all these terrible things, he tries to resolve it in the wrong way, and that's kind of how the end of the film plays out. It's kind of, yes, there is a kind of moral redemption in it, but it's really about this character who like anybody could make the wrong choices.
And what are the challenges then of actually getting the film made?
So it's tricky because you have to find somebody who's enthusiastic enough about that as well, who has some money that you can make the film with, and
is it about who you can get involved on screen as well, the on-screen talent?
Yes,
how does it work if you've got somebody?
Yeah, that certainly happens. And once we kind of got going, I wrote the film with Paul McGann. I didn't write it for Paul McGann. I wrote it with him in mind, partly because I've been thinking about him for this other film as that character, so it kind of transferred. It was a kind of long process in a sense to kind of build up to that, where you can actually try and get the thing to somebody. And it was certainly something that kind of made the whole production gel in terms of, attaching people to it. And it's a very kind of long, complex story. And if I had to repeat the steps, I don't know if I could.
From start to finish, from your initial idea to it being finished, how long does it take? Are we talking a few years or?
Probably about 3 years. And that's pretty quick because I've got other things I've maybe been working on 10 years or more. And you kind of never really think, oh, well, it's 10 years have gone by, it's never going to happen. Because you try and make, sometimes things just come back to life again.
Yeah, do you fall out of love with some of the ideas?
Or
Sometimes,
you might put them to one side for a bit because they don't suit the industry at this time or whatever. Or there's always different challenges, and you have to try and create the film that is satisfying to you, but also is going to work for the film market or for the film industry.
With The Undertaker in particular, where did you film that? Did you film everything here in Bristol? And what crew did you hire? Were they all local?
Yeah, good question. That was something that was very much the original concept of it. Was I was trying to write something that I thought, well, if I write something where you've got only a handful of characters and they're really just in one enclosed space, then I can imagine how we might do that. So I would say probably 70% of the movie takes place in the Undertaker shop, which is, a group of several rooms where he kind of does his business and he meets with people, but also you've got the mortuary at the back.
And that was filmed, that was Bristol.
That was all what we did. And this was always part of the plan. I mean, although it's a kind of fairly modestly budgeted movie, and normally for that kind of film, you would go to locations because in theory, they're cheaper. But this was a period movie. It's set in the early 1960s. So if you go to locations, you've got to dress them for the period and you've got to kind of start to make them look right for the story you're telling. Because it's not a contemporary story and it's not there's a kind of dreamlike quality to the film. It's not I don't want to say it's not a realistic film. It's a realistic film, but there's a stylized element to it, which you can't find by just going up the road and filming in a real Undertaker shop. It's got this kind of gothic film noir vibe to it. So, because I knew I could get the sets built probably more practically than someone else might, I knew how we could do it. I knew how we could reuse them because the sets that we did build got reused. Some of them got turned into different environments, like maybe up to 5 times. The benefit of just going into one studio and filming everything in one studio meant that everybody was there. So if you suddenly kind of, that's not working, you can turn around and shoot something else. You don't lose all that time. I mean, one of my personal pet hates with filming is when you have to do a unit move where you kind of suddenly everybody's in one place in the morning.
Yeah.
And you think, oh, we've got a day filming. Well, of course you haven't, because you lose like 3 hours or 4, it can be even worse. If you're in London, you're trying to do a unit move, it's like 4 hours is gone and nobody ever actually gets to the second location. And there's always a few people missing. Even by the end of the day, it's like, where is that makeup mirror? Oh, it's in like Camden or something. So to eliminate that was more efficient for the film. We made the film in 23 days and it was all in studio.
All in a Bristol studio.
Yes, all in Bottle Yard, who were absolutely wonderful. We were in one of the studios at Bottle Yard 1, and we were able to use other parts of Bottle Yard for the exterior scenes in the film. So we never really went into the real world, which I think kind of helps the look of the film.
But great to be able to film it on the doorstep in Bristol. And what about all the post-production? Was that Bristol as well?
Yes. Bristol, it was all Bristol for the post-production, and the audio post was all done in Bristol. So,
what's your advice to people who want to get into this world?
Depending what level you're at, whether you're a student or whether you've graduated, whatever, you have to find a way of finding some other people who will join you in telling some kind of story on film. And that's up to you to choose what that is and make something that's relevant to you. I think, the reality is if you make a short film or you make, well, literally, if you make a short film, you're not going to make any money out of it. It's not going to be a commercial enterprise. But the more filmmaking you do, the more conversant you get with the whole process, and you can't get into filmmaking by not filmmaking. You can't sit there and hope it's going to happen. You have to kind of somehow take some steps into filmmaking and see it as a kind of, well, tell a story that you actually care about or have some enthusiasm for, or has some relevance that you can enthuse other people in. I don't know this because I'm not a young person, but I think it's kind of tricky for young people now because it's easy to be overly influenced by all the filmmaking styles that are out there. And you have to kind of just find your own way of filtering those influences. It's okay to emulate or look up to or be influenced by certain styles of filmmaking or other filmmakers. But in terms of filmmaking, there's no point in trying to be like, Wes Anderson, because Wes Anderson's Wes Anderson. And actually, the truth is with, Wes Anderson's obviously hugely successful, but he's stuck being Wes Anderson. If Wes Anderson wants to make a slasher movie, they're not going to let him. It's not going to work. So, his job is to be Wes Anderson now, and he's stuck with it. So
try and be original.
Try and find your own way of being original within the lexicon of filmmaking.
So finally, we're asking all our podcast guests what makes them happy. See what I did there? What makes them happy in their work?
Oh, I get it.
Yeah. So what makes you happy about coming to work?
It's exciting when you're working on something and you look at the monitor and it looks better than you thought it was going to look. And that sounds rather sort of mundane in some ways, but so many things can go wrong and the ingredients might not mesh together or whatever. And you have a sort of picture in your head of how it's going to be. And if you look at that monitor, you go, wow, this is better than I thought it was going to be. That makes me happy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me.